Guys, welcome back to Rodder's Garage. I am back on the Banger Roadster race car project today. I have exactly, at this point, 4 days to get this thing done. I had 30 days total to build this entire car. I've got the body far enough along now at this point where it could be driven and it's safe enough to drive around. I'm going to go ahead and get started on this. I'm going to pull the rest of the studs out of the head and the side of the engine here, pop all the valves, get everything cleaned up there, try to keep the dust and dirt and stuff out of the ports in the valve chest over here. Probably be running the vacuum, the shop vac a lot as I'm cleaning things up and wire wheeling. And then we'll get all the valves back in and mess with those rod caps and see if I can't get them tightened up. And hopefully I can put everything back together and make this thing run. Let's get started. So as I'm pulling this thing apart here, I just noticed something, and I bet you one of you guys had probably noticed it before me, to be honest. This thing has big intake valves in it already. I wasn't even paying attention that the intakes were bigger, which is awesome. Also, the intakes have press-in valve guides and modern style collets on the retainer on the bottom, which I'm having trouble getting loose. There, I got that one. So that's kind of a bonus for me. I've got the big intakes in it. That should be good for a couple of horsepower anyway. And the press-in guides and that style lock on those, that's kind of a cool deal. A little added bonus. I can't believe I didn't notice the bigger valves on the top, but I guess I had other things on my mind. Like, I don't know, the simple fact that it didn't run and that it was full of water. But, yeah, that's kind of an added bonus for me. Look away if you can't handle it. I know it's not the right thing to do, but... Ooh, boy, if I had another flat bar, that'd be a lot better. Alright guys, so I'm going to pack some rags here in the valve chest so it covers all of the feed holes for the cam and the mains, specifically the mains. Put some rags in here, and then I'm going to put the cover on it, and I'm going to go ahead and do a serious hardcore wire wheeling of the ports and the deck and probably the cylinders. And then I'll vacuum everything out, and when I open this back up, I'll roll these rags out, and whatever falls down through the valve guides in theory, should be on those rags, not down in any of the openings for the mains or anything. And then I'll run the vacuum over everything again. I've got this paper towel right up tight to the valve guides where they come through from the ports. And everything's gonna get a serious brake cleaning at some point too here. Let it run down through the timing cover onto the floor, and at that point, I will probably plug the main feeds and cam feeds with something. And then make sure everything gets vacuumed out once more. So, let me put that side cover on with a couple of loose bolts. Turn the fan on. So the valves are all back in the engine and everything's cleaned up on the top side here. Last night, as you guys saw, I went ahead and wire wheeled all of the intake and exhaust valves and the guides. And off camera last night, I got the intake and exhaust valves installed in cylinder number 1. I wanted to play around with lapping them with the drill like I did, as you guys saw here this morning on the other ones. Intake valve on 1 was really bad. The seat looked absolutely terrible. And I lapped this with the heavy valve grinding compound for probably, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 minutes before it looked like that seat was good enough to actually seal again. But it did turn out pretty nice. I checked the clearance or the valve lash on the bottom. There was still a few thousandths there, so I didn't cut too far down with the valve lapping compound, but I did achieve a visually good seal on that valve, which before I did that, I don't think would have sealed very well at all. So this morning I went ahead, lapped the rest of them, did a light lap on them until the seats and valves themselves looked good, and got everything reinstalled back in the engine with the brand new valve springs. So all of that should be good to go. I did just roll the engine over. They all move freely. I don't think I'll have any more sticking valves over here. As for the deck of the engine cleaned up really good. I used a brass wire wheel on a 4.5-inch angle grinder, so it wasn't so aggressive on it like a stainless wheel. But regardless, I got everything wire wheeled there, tops of the pistons and the cylinder walls. Over here, where this coolant jacket is, you can see that there's like a little weld BB there and a very low spot going into this coolant jacket. That might be something to watch out for when I install the head. I am going to copper spray everything and install a new gasket, but I might actually put a little dab of Right Stuff over here as well on this edge, just to maybe add a little extra protection against that possibly leaking once things are up and running. Other than that, everything looks good on the deck. As for the pistons, they are 60 over. After I wire wheeled them, I could see the 60 on them right there. So it is punched 60 over already. And, you know, after seeing the big valves in it and the modern style guides and retainers on the intakes, well, obviously someone did rebuild this at one point in time, but who really knows when, and it definitely got hurt by more than likely sitting outside and getting water inside of it. That was probably the cause of most of these issues here. So, which also, now that I bring that up, was another interesting point. We were talking about that oil pump being sheared in here, and the oil pump still spun out of here, even though it was absolutely packed full of disgusting junk down in the oil pan. It did still spin when I took it out. And someone brought up that maybe that water was in the pan and they tried to start it when it was frozen. And that's what sheared the oil pump drive. And then once the water obviously melted, the ice melted, then the pump could spin freely again. So that's an interesting thing. I never thought of that because I did wonder how the pump still spun so good and the pump drive was sheared. So probably something along those lines. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead, clean up the floor under this thing and get on to trying to tighten up those rod caps in this thing. Let's get started with that. All right, guys, well, I just pulled the cap off rod number 2. I already did number 1 off camera. I just wanted to see if all of this was going to work out for me. So number 1's actually finished already. I did sand the cap down just a little bit on the bench with about, I think I counted, really, I think 30 passes back and forth on my foot-long piece of sandpaper on the bench. 30 passes back and forth, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. It worked out great, actually. So I torqued everything back down. I checked it twice at the end. Let's check this one. I'm gonna go ahead and polish the crank real quick. It was kind of scuzzy here on the actual crank itself, but I ran to the machine shop this morning and got myself some finishing emery cloth over here, and I did the first journal, and it cleaned up really, really easy. So I'm gonna clean this up first, put the cap back on with Plasti-Gauge, torque it down, and pull it back off and see what the clearance actually is on number 2 Maybe this one's right on the money. It kind of feels like it. And then the back two, I'll continue on with the exact same program. All right, so let's see where we're at here. You know what? That one felt tighter, but it was not. I guess I'm gonna sand this cap down too, which shouldn't take too much. I'll bring you guys over to the drill press where I set up my sandpaper and show you how I did the first one. I guess the drill press was probably the flattest surface I had here in the garage at home, so it seemed to work pretty good, and it didn't take long at all either. Let's start off with 25 passes, go check it again, and see where we're at. Hold it nice and flat to the table. $25. Let's go try it. So I'm gonna go ahead and go take a couple more passes off. Let's try this again. I think I'll go 10 more at this point. The other thing too is that sandpaper was brand new on the first cap and I didn't change it. What I should have probably done was used a new piece of sandpaper on the bench over there for each cap to make things more accurate. But I'm just gonna go do 10 more on that same piece and we will try this again. All right, 10 more passes off. Plastic gauge installed. Let's try this one more time. Close enough for me. It looks like it's right on the money. Perfect. Clean everything up, torque it down, move on to cylinder number 3. Just like the other ones, looks good, but it's a little loose. I'm gonna go ahead and not even check this one to begin with. Just go take 30 passes off of it and then check it and see where I'm at, because it definitely feels the same, if not looser, than number 1 and 2, so. Pretty darn good right where it's at. I think I took 35 strokes off of this cap. Right on the money, a little on the shy side. I think I'll go give it like three to 5 more strokes, and I'm not even gonna check it again. That one will be right on.
You have some things here.
So that's it. I've got the back cap ground down and clearanced as well. I had to try this one twice. It feels a lot more like it should be. Yeah, a lot better. I'm happy with it. Now, I was pretty excited about all this because it actually didn't take that long. I've probably got maybe an hour invested into doing all 4 of these caps. They ground down really easy. There's actually not a lot of surface area on the top of them. I still have to put cotter pins in all them. And really, I could have went on and cleaned up the oil pump and started getting the pan and all the parts back on the engine. But I did notice one thing while I was under here, and that is this timing gear. It is broke. Or not broke, it is off of the hub. It came loose. You could kind of hear that. Hold on, let me roll the engine the other way. There. Well, just take a look at it once. See that? The gear itself is actually broke loose from the hub, from the actual hub on the end of the camshaft, and that's not good. When I was rolling this thing over, putting all the valves back in, I kept hearing that noise, and I actually thought it was because I had the cap on number 1 rod and the cap on number 4 rod loose, but actually it was this timing gear that I'm actually hearing. So I'm gonna have to run down to the shop and probably grab the timing gear off of the Yard Art Model A's engine, or out of the box where all the parts are in storage for it anyway. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to pull the radiator off, the front timing cover, the motor mount, and get this thing jacked up so I can change that timing gear, because that's probably going to be a problem, being broken loose like that. So I guess in the meanwhile, I can maybe clean the oil pump up. I might as well clean the oil pump up, I guess. Get all that stuff ready to go, put the oil pump drive and the pump in here. I guess in theory I could put the pan on here. I might do that. Maybe we'll do the pan and the pump, and I can do the timing cover and change that gear afterwards. I guess I can also put the rocker or the valve chest cover on, and the head too, really. So, but at some point I am going to have to pull the timing cover and switch that gear. Just figured I'd bring that up right away too. So I am going to go ahead and probably start working on the oil pump. Let's see how that looks inside. So I've got my oil pan all cleaned up and ready to go on the engine. Last night, after I got done cleaning up the oil pump and the oil pump drive for the engine, I ran down to the shop to go get a cam gear because of how bad the cam gear is in this engine. And when I got down there to grab that, I realized I didn't have a good method of taking the cam nut off. I didn't have a specific socket for it, and I really didn't feel like using the air chisel method and mutilating not only the nut on this cam that I had at the shop, but also the one in this engine. So I spent a little bit of time and built myself a socket. Wrote up a program on the plasma table, made the bottom side just like the cam nut, and half by half hole on the back for an impact to go in, which at some point in time I probably will have to weld a socket on this, because after taking just one nut off, it's already kind of mutilating that hole, and it's just mild steel, so that's to be expected. But it did work really well for taking that cam nut off. So I've got a good gear here. I also picked up some other head bolts that I had because some of these were kind of shady. Grabbed myself an oil pressure and ammeter gauge to put in so I can see, make sure there's oil pressure on the thing. Got myself a voltage regulator, and over here on the floor I have a generator that I used to have on my Buick T-bucket thing that I swapped out to a alternator at one point in time because this couldn't quite keep up with an electric fuel pump and headlights on at night. So I'm gonna put that generator on here. Off camera last night after I came home from getting all these parts, I went ahead and put all the cotter pins and the connecting rods, put the rear main seal in, and slid the oil pump up into the block last night. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the pan on here this morning quick, get all that bolted up in here because I need that on so I can put the floor jack under it and support the engine. I don't really have to lift it, but I need to support it so I can pull the front motor mount and timing gear cover to switch out that cam gear. So I'm gonna get the oil pan on this morning, and that's probably going to be it. I'm gonna run down to the shop and get some work done today, and then when I get back tonight, I'll support the engine, swap the cam gear, and hopefully get the head on this thing. Try to wrap this thing up because today's Monday, and like I said, we're leaving Thursday morning. So I'll get the pan on and then get to work. There's a potential too that I might maybe be able to find an hour or two during my day to throw together an intake and an exhaust for this thing. I've got a carburetor off a 51 Chevy, and I already cut a flange for the intake and exhaust. I've got it bolted on a block down at the shop. So if I can find time today, I'd really like to build an intake and an exhaust for this. If I can't find the time because, well, days are numbered till the show. If I can't find the time, we'll put the original intake and exhaust off of here back on just to get it there. I'm gonna get this pan on and go to work. Let's get started. So it is now Tuesday night. After work yesterday, I stayed at the shop late, and off camera, I built myself an intake and an exhaust for this thing. So I have all that ready. I think it's gonna work out quite well once we get that far. But I did build that intake and exhaust, got home at about 9:30 last night, and pulled the timing cover off this thing and got ready basically to take this gear off, swap them out, and then start getting the rest of the engine stuff back together. I also took the generator off. Actually, I left it on the bracket. We'll have to change the generator yet. But basically the idea at this point is I'm going to go ahead and get this gear swapped, get the timing cover resealed, all back on, get the head on, torque the head down. And at that point, I probably will fill it with oil, and before I put the valve chest cover and intake and exhaust on, I will probably crank this thing over for a little while. I'll just run the starter with the spark plugs out, and I want to run it for a little while and make sure the oil pump is pumping up, make sure all that stuff's in good order before I put the valve chest cover and the intake and exhaust on. So I'm going to go ahead now, swap out this gear, get this stuff going, and let's see how far we get here tonight. I really would like to at least have this thing running or fire it or close to it by the time I go in the house here tonight. So tomorrow it's going to be a bunch of little stuff like wiring. I want to change this whole front axle assembly yet, which I have one outside. That shouldn't take much. Also, today I sandblasted the head bolts and all the hardware. Got all that cleaned up to get the head bolted down. And I made some bearing holders for some lip style bearings for the brake bar under this thing, because this is a different setup than the normal A's I've seen. This brake bar under here is two-piece and kind of goes into the sides of the transmission, and every time I hit the brakes, this thing just, it holds them up. Basically, it doesn't return. So I redid a complete brake bar out of another car, and I want to swap that out yet too. So a lot of work to be done yet, so let's get started. See if my socket works on this engine like it did taking the gear off that other cam. All right, here we go. Not with the old Ryobi. Fire up the air. That worked nice. Ooh. Hey, hey, hey.